Good morning, Vikings fans. This is Morning Joe's, and I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com, and PurpleTerritoryRadio.com. Here with about 1 pint lighter Joe Oberly. How you doing, man?
Quite good. Not quite a pint, but the monthly vampire poke. I'm good. I'm good.
What a good guy.
My blood still is got some purple coloring.
Say, did it come out purple? More purple than last month or less? I don't know. We'll get into it, but I don't know how to feel about this Giants victory. Although it's a huge relief. Morning Joe's is brought to you by Ticket Club. You can still sign up for that free premium membership for 12 months on Ticket Club using the discount code SKOLPTSD. If you're looking for tickets to the Twins Yankees series, you might want to pick those up sooner than later based on the way things are going. Outside of that, we are also brought to you by Total Sports Enterprises, who was at our event on Friday night with Chad Greenway. They had some really cool Vikings memorabilia. And speaking of Chad Greenway, we are brought to you by Grey Duck Vodka as well. We'll talk about that event a little bit more, but this is the second episode that we are broadcasting on the Big Heads Media Network, and I have a quick promo for that network, and then we'll get into all the fun action.
Hey everyone, Chris Williams here, inviting you to join me and my co-host Perry Seibert every other Friday for our podcast. We're watching here. Every other Friday, we talk movies, from our favorite directors to looks back at vintage releases to our thoughts on today's current trends. This is all backed up with the knowledge of two guys who've been writing about films for years and talking about them their entire lives. From Spielberg to Soderbergh and Malick to Michael Bay, we are opinionated moviegoers giving you opinionated movie talk. Tune in wherever you get your podcasts from Big Heads Media.
And now, on with the show.
Wow, I like that ending. That just reminded me that we have to do a promo, and wow, we have. I'm nervous.
We have to do one for what? For our show?
Yeah, for other shows to play during their show to kind of.
Hi, this is Morning Joe.
Yeah.
How's that voice?
I want to get that. I want to get a lot of really like '90s era sound effects, like the clown horn. Make it as cheesy and horrible as possible. That would actually be pretty funny. Or just play like 45 seconds from Fargo, since that's what everyone around the country thinks of Minnesota anyway.
Or Robin Williams saying good morning and then put in Vikings fans instead of Vietnam.
There you go. And then we're done.
And then we'd have to pay for that and, all those rates. But whatever.
Well, that's why you join a national network. You get that huge bankroll. Yes. So, yeah, I mean, it was a good weekend, I suppose, for the Vikings. I feel, I don't know how you felt about the game. I more so was relieved, but at the same time a little bit irritated that a team, I mean, they should have won that game. Barkley wasn't playing. You're going against a rookie quarterback. I mean, the Giants were 2-2, but they're clearly not where they're planning on being. They're a team that's on the upswing, if anything. And the Vikings should have beat them. And so it seems just like, especially when it comes to how Cousins played, and we'll get into that as well, that, this is what they should do. It's just really frustrating to see them firing on all cylinders like that, because it's something that shows just how much potential this team really does have when they perform the way that they're supposed to.
Well, it's just a little concerning that not concerning. It's funny how our expectations for each game feed into how we respond to the result. I mean, yes, the Vikings needed this one desperately. They needed this road victory. They needed to right the ship. They needed Cousins to pass the ball well. They needed to play like they had against the Raiders and Atlanta. But it's kind of about expectations. Coming into the Atlanta game, we all said, "Oh man, they got to get this one. They're a tough team. They're headed back to the playoffs." Well, that didn't turn out to be. And then you go into Green Bay, and it's going to be a tough battle. But you had the game there at your grasp, and you gave it away. You think so you're. I guess my point is, I go back to there's only one game that really makes me mad, and that's the Green Bay game. The Bears game, they got their tails beat for whatever reason. They should have won the Green Bay game. This season looks completely different. This game or Sunday, it's blah. It's blah. You're exactly right. That's what they should have done. They should have gone in there and played just how they did, dominated on defense and performed and executed on offense, on both running and passing, and they did. So you come away with it, well, what did we learn? Not really that much. It's just another repeat of the Raiders game. It's kind of blah. This will be a bigger test this weekend when they play Philadelphia. And if they come away with victories in the next two games against Philadelphia and Detroit, I think it's a whole new outlook for this team. Right now, it's in a holding pattern. Disappointing that they look so bad against the Bears. I knew that, but I felt that was an aberration. This is what we expected. And therefore, no big whoop,
Yeah, and it's hard to. I mean, the Bears game, seeing the Bears lose to the Raiders also made you feel like, man, they really let one go there as well. But I know what you mean.
Who are the Bears or the Vikings?
The Vikings.
Oh.
In that, I don't know, maybe because the Raiders had a week to game plan against Chase Daniels that they had a better opportunity there. But there was just aspects of the Giants game too, this defensive play calling, which we'll also get into.
They were pretty fired up. They were pretty fired up at home to play the Vikings, and Zimmer kind of pissed them off with a little note that it's not that tough to go in there and play. They were fired up, and I talked about last week. It's a week to week league, They got in late to London. They weren't mentally prepared for this one. The Raiders were. They've been getting their butts kicked up and down the National Football League. So they said, okay, it's time to shine. And they came out fired up. It's such an emotional game, and we've seen it. Here's just another example of it. It's a week-to-week league, and anybody can beat anybody if you're
That's
not right.
really, as much as we got into it a little bit at that point in the podcast last week, that's kind of what I took away from this week, the week-to-weekness of it. And really quickly, we'll touch on, just to start things out, Friday night we had a bottle signing / merchandise memorabilia signing event at McDonald's Liquor.
It was awesome.
In South Minneapolis with Chad Greenway. Yeah, it was really, really cool. I have an article going up today about that. We'll have some pictures from it. We had about 100-some people show up. At least sold about 100 bottles of Grey Duck vodka, and Joe came, a few other writers came, Chad was there, and from what I can tell, he was very pleased by it, so I highly suggest that people try a bottle of Grey Duck vodka the next time.
He's great. He's great with his with the people, that in the public. I mean, he did seem like he was having a good time, and he was going back and forth with everybody that came in, taking pictures, signing, chit-chatting. And it was, there was a lot of people there, but it wasn't you got the opportunity to spend a couple of minutes with Chad and talk about just about anything. It was great. And the McDonald's Liquor has a great
setup for that.
Right, down in their basement. So it was really nice in that regard. So
I think the biggest takeaway, too, and that's probably Chad calling to remind us, because he was on the podcast last week. If you didn't get a chance to check that show out, definitely do, because he doesn't really hold anything back, and he talked about his thoughts on everything. More so, some of the dig stuff wasn't as palpable at the time of the recording of the show as it was during on Friday night, but I was interested in his opinion on that. But I think you know where I'm going with this. I wish I had it recorded. But I asked Chad about his theory, or how he felt about my theory about the Big Ten creating better pro players, and I believe his response was,
he's biased.
Yes, I know. I was like, why did you throw that in there? But he's basically said I played for the Big Ten, so of course I'm going to agree with that. So, this is the last episode checkmate, case closed. It's over. Yeah, my dad said I should make a shirt. I forget how he worded it, for you to wear. That just basically said Big Ten best players in the NFL. But yeah, I mean, just the let's start off with something that I've heard in regards to the game on Sunday on KFan and other places. Just the kind of the Cousins conundrum. You know, he looked spectacular against the Giants. I think he had like an 82% completion rate. He's at halftime he was like missed 3 throws out of like 24. He had almost 300 yards at the time, 1 touchdown. It's pretty easy, I guess the lazy take would be to say that he plays great against lesser opponents, and then doesn't play well against better opponents, and that's not some huge, spectacular new take. Everyone talks about his record against teams with a 500 record or better.
I'm not sure it's a lazy or a unique take, but
I mean, what do you attribute that to, though?
Simply
it's so
true.
Different.
That's what the numbers say. I don't know. You know,
Is it like in his head, or it's just amazing how well he played against the Giants versus the Bears. I mean, it's incredible.
Oh, you know, it also depends on the offensive line too, because that defensive line of the Bears we know is a beast as a collective unit, and they were coming after him. And the Giants, not so much. That, you know, I don't know if they game planned differently to mitigate whatever rush the Giants had. They just certainly don't have the Bears rush. And Cousins had time back there. They rolled him out. They did rollouts and bootlegs and play action, and he was really good on play action. But when he got out of the pocket, he had all the time in the world often, and he got a chance to look downfield and really survey and then put the ball where he wanted to go with it. You know, those receivers are going to get open. Whine as they did last week. There is, you know, some validity behind it because they work really hard and perform really well to get open. They are open, and he was missing them in previous games, but he had the opportunity to find Thielen quite often, 7 catches for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. But Cousins had time. He had time. Yeah. And therefore that mitigates his anxiety in the pocket, his nervousness, his happy feet. And he surprised me as being a little more accurate on the run than I anticipated, because we'd always heard that wasn't his jam, that he's very accurate, but I think he likes it from the pocket. Well, he got out on the wing and he threw some nice balls in there.
He really did.
Yeah, it was nice to see.
I mean, I don't want to sound like such a Cousins homer, because I know that I am, and I'm pretty open about it. Granted, I did really come off the bandwagon. I made a few shows about that. I wrote an article about it.
Just gonna mention that, Joe. You're probably, you know, you're like someone who's back on the bottle.
It feels like it. You know, it's like he's come crawling back. It's some sort of like really abusive relationship, but that's why I'm trying to temper my expectations a little bit, and I'm trying to really ask you like how you felt about it, because I really more felt irritated by it, really, to be honest, in a way that it's like, yeah, you can do that, and you know, he is bad when he gets flustered, when there's no time. Some quarterbacks, you know, no quarterback wants to be pressured, and a lot of NFL quarterbacks, when they have copious amounts of time, I mean, I remember a couple plays from that Giants game where he was just standing there. He had a lot of time. He took advantage of it, but I don't think there's many that have the drop-off that he does when he doesn't have that time. It's really hard to get your head around how spectacular he looked, especially in the first half when the game was a little bit closer. Some of those throws, I mean, that touchdown to Thielen, both of them were great throws. The first one more so than the second.
Spectacular.
And so that's the whole thing.
You're as effusive this week as you were down last week.
I know, but I guess I'm trying to enjoy it while I can, because I did say this and I'll stand by it. Maybe during the Bears game, that I still don't have any faith that he'll do this when it matters, in the playoffs, or when there's a lot of pressure coming, so on and so forth, and that still remains to be seen. I do think that the Eagles game is a really big test. I'm happy it's at home, so on and so forth, but he did what he had to do, I guess. It's so frustrating to see that he can play that well.
Well, you said it earlier. Every quarterback, gets that pressure from time to time. It all depends on how you respond to it. And Cousins hasn't thus far responded well. I mean, in big games, pressure games, as silly, at Monday night games, or I should say primetime games, as silly as these stats are, because one game doesn't mean that much to the next, you have to start to think, man, there's something there, and it has to do with how he handles pressure. He doesn't do it very well. I saw this week as a confidence rebuilder. It helped him start to build back his confidence. And, I won't go so far as to say swagger yet, because it was the Giants and they were bad. Their defense was terrible. I mean, the Vikings just ran roughshod out of them. They could have scored more if they wanted. And,
at the end of the game, or just
exactly. In general. And, the test will come in the next couple of weeks in a Philadelphia team it's a little bit beat up in the secondary, I'm told, but the following week is against Detroit, who's revitalized, who has played well. They're undefeated yet to this point, and they're coming off. They won't be coming off a bye. But anyway, that's when we'll see it. Is this a trend towards the good? Because we have seen some shaky play from him. So I'm not completely to the point where you are. That it was spectacular. It was good. It's what it needed to be. He played better. He plays like he can when he has time and he's not feeling the pressure as badly. He did get sacked 3 times, so there was some pressure there. But I think he knew that he was going to have the way they sprinted him out. I think it really helped him. And he did throw. I wrote in our chat that we had this week. My viewing of the game is always a little bit ahead of like Kirby's. I think out west is where he's from, and I said that they just had the best play of the game, and what it was he goes, what, Cousins throwing the ball away, and it's exactly what it was. He actually had the same situation as the Packers game, or very similar, and he threw the ball away.
I know exactly what play you're talking about.
Yeah.
And watching highlights of the game, and they actually put that play into the extended highlights on YouTube, and I almost wonder if they did that specifically because of what happened in the Packers game. That was another part of it. And when I mean spectacular, I guess I just mean statistically, he was really good. He didn't have any turnovers either, which I think was good. But I think you're right. I think rolling him out has helped. Maybe not I have to look at the stats, but not relying solely on. They were doing like 35% of the time play action passing, which they didn't do a lot of last year, and I understand that, but they became a little bit predictable. I think they showed a lot more diversity in their play calling this week than they did against the Bears.
I thought he only missed like 1, maybe 2 passes too when on play action, so it was really effective. They executed very well in those plays, and if you and I can see it, that the Eagles are going to see it, and they're going to be try to keep him in the pocket, and they're going to expect when you see Cousins have that success when he's been struggling, the Vikings are going to have to go back to some of that kind of play calling, even though that might be predictable, because that's what how he's going to play better. I don't know, but especially take it away.
Yeah, I mean, with the Bears game, the run game obviously was not working, so they couldn't do as much as they were doing. It felt like just because the Giants were allowing everything to work that they were doing a lot. There's a lot of screens. I think I'm not sure, but that might have been Cook's most yardage through the air. It had to have been. He had an amazing. I mean, in a year full of career games, Dalvin Cook had a career day, fumble or not. Like you said, they could have scored more points. He was almost about to get into the end zone on that fumble, which I applaud the defense on being resilient and getting 2 points that way, which we'll talk about in a second. But, God, man, Cook is just a beast. I mean, that's what I put on the agenda without really one way or the other. But it was nice to see him also catch some passes and show opposing teams what they can do in that regard, so they have to plan for that on top of everything else. I think it's like the 5th poison when things are operating the way in a good way. I shouldn't say the way that they should be because it doesn't work that way. But when things are operating at full potential, this team has a ton of options. I mean, Olabisi Johnson had 4 catches. They were just spreading the ball around everywhere. Kyle Rudolph had a catch, which is huge because he's been pretty much held without one for the entire season. So yeah, it was exciting to see Cook get some yardage through the air. I think he had about 210 total yards.
He did. He had 210 yards from scrimmage, which is a career high. I want to take those a little bit with a grain of salt. I saw that they flashed that on the screen. I included it in my post game, but it's like, his career hasn't, it's basically been 15 games coming into this season. So you got to take it with a little grain of salt. I mean, I think if he'd have been around for those 2 full seasons, anyway, it's great. Good for him. It's all the best. But what impressed me is this kid can take something that looks like nothing, a little check down right over the line with people standing around, and he turns it into something. Time and time again. There was one that he caught just over the line. It looked like he was dead. He made a quick move to the left and took it up the sidelines for about 15, 20, 25 yards. I go, man. It's just fun to watch, we know Dylan and Biggs, what they do. It is fun to, after 2 years of just angst about this guy and his injuries, it is such a treat to watch him perform. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, a couple of things there. I didn't know when they drafted him, and maybe not many people did, just how all-around good this guy could be in like every facet. We're used to Adrian Peterson being a 2-down back who could, run one specific way, wasn't going to catch a lot of balls out of the backfield, wasn't going to, do this or that. The things that Cook does, it's more and more impressing me and astounding me. And I was rewatching the game because I had to go into the store on Sunday, so I was kind of watching the game because they have a TV there, but I had to rewatch it afterwards. And explaining to her as someone who's new to the Vikings, just the ability for him, like you said, to turn nothing into something, like where he looks like he doesn't have the right angle to get around the edge. Multiple times in that game, he was finding, totally 5-10 yards out of nothing. Where I was always my dad would always tell me growing up watching football myself that it's a rare few guys that can make that turn and get around guys when they don't have that angle, and he was doing it left and right against the Giants. And so I'm just super, super excited. I think that the conversations for him being a top back in the NFL are completely valid. There's nothing this guy has shown that he can't do, and especially now that he's staying healthy. You have guys like Zeke or Saquon Barkley who can do a lot too. There might be a little bit more beefier, might be better goal line guys, but man, can he, especially when he's catching balls out of the backfield, it's really, really fun to watch. And then you get a guy like Alexander Madison who comes in and he's getting his, he takes advantage of every opportunity that he's getting. Amir Abdullah had a couple good carries as well. It's really exciting as a fan, and just for what it means for this team if they can find some semblance of consistency in the passing game.
In the passing game or the running game?
The passing game.
Okay. Yeah, it's great to see. I think we're getting the depth at receiver is by increments, increasing a little bit.
Yeah.
Olabisi has been solid. They still have Chad Beebe, who's on the injured list right now, and
Doxson should be back for the Cowboys game. He's hoping.
Yeah, and so we don't know what he can do yet. Hopefully, he's ready to go when he gets back, and he knows enough about the system that he can be effective. But in the meantime, Olabisi looks like he did in the preseason. I mean, he's catching the ball when they throw it to him. He's getting open, and he's got a little wiggle after the catch. So that's a great thing. And you need a third receiver out there. That's all there is to it. The fact that he's getting balls thrown his way is shows that you do. They're gonna try to lock down Thielen and Diggs, and there's going to be some opportunities for someone else. Apparently not the tight end, by the way. The other thing too is I forgot what I was going to say, but I did see we saw Laquan Treadwell back on the field, which was kind of interesting. So he is getting a game day activation, and he was blocking for one. I think might have been Cook downfield, which was nice to see. I think he could have sprung him.
He's a decent blocker.
Yes, he's good to have on the team. I mean, that I still applaud that move, even though I was so done with him. You know, when Chad went down, BB went down, it was a good move to make. So
yeah, and it's if you were to print out the transcript of this podcast, a la what the impeachment inquiry, and
do that.
What? Oh no! See what you just said. It might sound kind of funny that you said, he's catching the balls, they throw his way. It's like, yeah, well, that's how football works, but it's true. I mean, it's incredibly important to have a third receiver who comes through when his number is called, even if that might not be four catches every week. As we saw with Treadwell, that just wasn't happening. Jarius Wright used to be great at doing that, and so having a guy that can come through and even get a couple yards after the catch, I think, is something they haven't had the last couple seasons. So it's so hard to not get excited when you watch a game like that. Granted, it was against a much lesser opponent, and they should have done it. To me, wins always make close losses worse, because I always, that's the way my brain works with football, I think, and in general. Like, oh, well, then they should have won this game. There's this really irritating guy that I run into at the gas station almost every day who claims to be a Cowboys fan, and is always laughing at me after the Vikings. Like, literally, just like I'll walk in and he'll be like, ah! Like, it's just, ugh. Anyway, I was talking to him about the Cowboys-Packers and how, man, it would have been really nice, like you said earlier, if the Vikings would have beat the Packers, because they had every opportunity to, which we'll talk about here in a minute, because we're going to talk about the NFC North a little bit more. But we've kind of touched on this. I put in the agenda, like, where do you stand, or where do we stand now in terms of the Vikings, what our expectations are. Are you still going kind of a week-to-week thing? I think, just to start, I'll just say it's this Eagles game is huge. Again, I'm very happy that it's at home. We did beat them last year in Philadelphia, if I recall correctly. They're not, like you said, they're beat up. They're missing a few players, but they're still a good team. They have the good young quarterback. They have, even without Deshaun Jackson, they have a good receiving core. Unfortunately, they have Jordan Howard, who has had some really big games against this Vikings defense, so he's got a lot of input, I'm sure, there. Plus, they're familiar with the Vikings. They played them the last two seasons. So I think it's a good test to see where we're at. I also think that the fact that they have a top rushing defense will force Cousins to have to, if you want to say it this way, put it on his shoulders and perhaps air it out a little bit more than he did against the Giants. So I think it's a huge opportunity. But if you were to ask me where this team's going to end up or so on and so forth, I have absolutely no idea. I mean, I don't want to demean or belittle the victory in New Jersey, because I totally have. But on the other end of it, I shouldn't do that, because if they would have lost that game, I would have been despondent, right? So I should at least be appreciative of the fact that they came through when they're quote-unquote supposed to, right? So, because if they would have lost, it would have been like, all right, things are bad, Diggs is definitely going to be pissed, so on and so forth. But they could go either way at this point, as far as I'm concerned.
I think what fans such as yourself and others, and even myself from time to time, do not take into consideration, and everybody's going to go, oh, Mr. Wet Blanket, but anybody can beat anybody. These teams are so close in their abilities. It's not like a Twins-Yankees thing, where one team is markedly better than the other time and time again.
Outside of the Patriots.
Outside of the Patriots.
Like Greenway, though, I loved that addendum that he was adding to what he was saying. Teams, except for the Patriots, are up and down. It was like, ugh.
It's true. I mean, Joe, they can go, this is a winnable game, but that doesn't mean they're going to win it. I mean, the Packers game was a winnable game, and they should have won it. But, like I said last week, it's for both teams, it's winnable. So it depends on who executes. I mean, these are cliches that come out of the players and coaches' mouth. It's who executes down the stretch, who makes a few plays. And that's what so often these games come to. And that's what this one's going to come to on Sunday. The Eagles are the team that gave the Packers their one loss this year.
Yeah.
They are a good team. They're not a great team. They're not the team that won the Super Bowl, but they're still a decent team. They have a great coaching staff. Their defensive coordinator, I can't think of his name, the former Lions coach, can't stand probably Zimmer and the Vikings. So he's going to be prepared to raise holy hell against them. He's the one that helped the Vikings get beat in the playoffs a couple of years ago by this team. But so it you have to remember that. I just don't get up and down as often with this, like I used to, when I was your age. Yes, like you do. Yeah. I used to do the same thing, but now I just have to take it with a grain of salt and really look at it realistically, like the teams do themselves, and say, okay, they got beat. We weren't ready to play, for whatever reason, and they weren't against the Bears, but they were last week. They certainly were against the Raiders. They were against Atlanta. They were for 3/4 of the game against the Packers, and that's a game they should have won. So the Vikings they're not going to become this world beater. I don't care if people had expectations for them to go to the Super Bowl this year. That doesn't mean it's true, and that doesn't mean it's going to happen. You've got to play each game, and you have to go out there each Sunday and win those games, even though if on paper it looks like you should. It doesn't always happen, and so it's going to be nick and tuck with this team all the way down the stretch to the end of the year, and hopefully they'll be in a position where they can win a game and go to the playoffs, because that's what I like.
They're certainly not going to get any easy games in the division. I mean, nope. even if the Lions were terrible, which they're most definitely not, they do have a loss, but it was 4 points to the Chiefs, who were the Chiefs. So it's going to be rougher. I would argue that the NFC North is the best division in football right now, which just sucks. And surprisingly, I'm a lot more mellow than I used 10 years ago. This show would have ended in a fist fight at some point with some random person. I wanted your thoughts a little bit on Diggs' day, because clearly he dominated the news cycle. I posted an article at 1 a.m. on Saturday night, or technically Sunday morning. As big as going into arguably the biggest Week 5 in recent team history. It's still all about Diggs, and he was, doing the will he, won't they. He traveled with the team, so everyone was like, that's a good sign. We talked to Chad about it on Friday night, and what his thoughts were, which I think a lot of people share those thoughts in regards to just, playing through it and that not being the right way to handle things. He had a few catches. You could see on that catch late in the game where he did the spin move and got around 2 guys, and then it took 3 guys to bring him down. You could see his frustration. It was palpable. I think his frustration stems from a good place. He also participated in that dance competition after Thielen's first touchdown, which I thought was a good sign. The Ziggy Wilf was throwing balls to him in the pregame. He did that wink to the media after the game. I forget specifically what he had said. But are you worried about him moving forward, being mercurial or unhappy, or do you think this game helped that in some way?
I'll be honest. I'm really kind of.
You're tired of it.
I am. There's part of me that is that. I can't stand this crap, this diva stuff. And you said, maybe it comes from a good spot. He wants to make the offense better. But how much does that mean? Throw me the ball. Yeah. I mean, I would like that delineated. Then tell me that, and then I'll get on his bandwagon. But I'm a little concerned that I don't know that he's satisfied. He only got 3 passes. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many targets there were anymore. I think it was, that was about it. And, Thielen had the big day. And, Dalvin Cook had a big day receiving. So I don't know if that's going to placate him or not. I don't think so. But and it bothers me that, dang well after what he said, and, there's truth to every rumor and all this BS. And that there has been some rumbling somewhere about about him wanting to leave. I thought it was interesting the Vikings fined him to over $200,000, and I guess that the reason being was that he had missed time in OTAs, which I had forgotten too, unexcused. All of a sudden we're setting up. Whereas
That
Diggs,
is a really good point. Oh my God, I
he is
completely
not
forgot
showing
about
up for that. And this is kind of a retroactive. This is, they had to make it sting a little bit. It's just
Yeah, I mean
we're
that's
not
a
going to
lot of
trade you.
money.
We're not going to trade you, and this stuff's unacceptable. You can't do this. So, here we're going to, they could have. I heard this someone say yesterday. They could have voided his $40 million guaranteed contract.
Oh man.
So in that regard, when you look at it in that context, where they find his tailbone, but by the same token, they didn't do the nuclear option and say, okay, this.
But they're
this
telling him that is still on the table if he doesn't straighten up and fly right, which I think.
I'm sure him and his agent know that. So
yeah.
I mean, just to finish my thought,
Wow.
I don't know. I don't know if this is over, and that bothers me. I don't think last week was enough to placate someone who wants the ball that bad. I see it's a bad omen that he looks around the league and sees Antonio Brown and Jalen Ramsey throwing fits and one of them getting away with it.
Yep.
I hope the Vikings hold fast and they don't trade him. He's a huge asset. He's incredible. I mean, you described that spin move. I mean, that's how talented this guy is. And he gets open just as much as Thielen, and he catches the ball well. So, I mean, just don't do this, Stefan. Just stop. You're a smart guy. You're a great guy. I love your personality. Don't be this guy.
No.
I mean, you've been paid.
That's exactly it. I would understand a little bit more if it was a contract year and he was saying these lack of catches are going to hurt my value. But the Vikings gave him a really, really, he's like the 12th highest paid wide receiver in the league per season average, but he has a lot more guarantees. He has a longer deal. A lot of those deals are for 40, 50 million. His is for 72 or 74, I forget which. So he can't be mad about the money because he is, for a guy who has only had 1,000 yards once, and it was by a 21 yards, so 1,021 yards. Other than that, he's never broken 900 yards. Now, in his defense, I can see that with the quarterback carousel the Vikings have had recently and really historically, that he might be frustrated because Teddy got hurt, then there was Bradford, then there was Keenum, now there's Cousins, and he feels like he's wasting these prime years. But that's why the Vikings gave him that money, because they saw that he was good enough to be a 1,500-yard guy, perhaps. But that there was other variables there that were restricting that. Whether or not this will help the team, I've made a huge argument in my article this weekend. If you want to hear more about Diggs and the situation, which I'm sure no one does, you can look there about that. But
2 points, Joe. 2 points.
Really, just really quickly. We got a lot of heat because we talked about Diggs missing from OTAs on this show, and I got a really long message from someone who had listened to the show or read the title. They didn't even listen to it, about making nothing out of something, or something out of nothing rather, about Diggs missing OTAs and blah blah blah. And so my question is, what was he mad about this offseason to miss those OTAs like that?
I think it's more of the same, what we're talking about here. I think that he saw how this offense is going to be constructed and how they were going to run heavy. They brought in, Kubiak to make it a run-centric offense, and he saw that in OTAs. He saw what they were doing. He probably saw the playbook and what was going on.
And the connection that Cousins and Thielen maybe had last year.
No, I don't know about that, but I think
that's my worry.
Well, here are my 2 points. A, wide receivers don't get to dictate what the game plan is. That's not your job. Stay in your lane. B, we heard this weekend, and I want to say this because I'm a Thielen Bobo and have been ever since you brought up who's the Bobo, Mobo from Germany. What's his name?
Mobo.
So I'm a Thielen Bobo because I told you he was going to make the team and Mobo was not. Anyway.
Worst take of all time.
We heard from we heard from a pretty reputable source this weekend, last Friday, I won't say who, that he said he didn't think Thielen handled things very well either in this whole situation. And he really didn't, because, he brought it out and he kind of pointed it at the media and said, this is more of a big deal than it is for, by you guys than it is for us,
Yeah.
And he Thielen is usually very savvy in the media and very restrained, and he still was. He had made the point after the game that you got to balance your offense. I can't argue with that. I think that's the key to the Vikings winning this season. And they're going to need a balanced offense. That's what we saw last week. It was 290 to 220 or something like that. So it was a freaking balanced offense, and that's how you win. I mean, I heard someone talking yesterday naming all these Super Bowls that had passing teams that, Dallas and San Francisco, and every team they named, they said they had great passing teams. Well, they also had a great running game. Yeah. Roger Craig, Emmitt Smith, were behind these Franco Harris for the Pittsburgh Steelers when they had, blah, blah, blah. So you got to have balance. Thielen was right. But,
I think he knows enough about the media to know that what he said was going to be interpreted that way. Also,
that's a good point. I wouldn't argue with that either.
I don't think that it was completely taken out of context. I talked about that in that long piece too, just in that he said, if he meant balance, that was fine, but there was like one thing that he said specifically. It was like, you have to be able to make simple throws or something, and it was like, well, there's only a lot of it could have been the passing game in general, but part of it was specifically about Cousins. To the point where I think he knew that, and he did his mea culpa, and so did Cousins on the podcast, which apparently Zimmer didn't like. Blah blah blah. But I had a question just too about since you've had a lot of access with the team, what your take on? You mentioned it a little bit that Diggs was always, I think you said was a nice guy, and so on and so forth. I mean, did you ever get those vibes from him? I know we've seen some stuff on the field, but like the diva vibes in the locker room.
In the locker room, I would say no. No, I've never seen him be anything but a solid individual in the locker room. He's very smart. He's savvy. He was always accessible. He didn't always, come out to be interviewed, but when he did, he would talk to anybody and everybody, and he was nice and congenial. And so you knew what this guy was like. Well, where I got the vibe is right in our plain sight. I complained about this guy with his me celebration every time he would do it. If you go back and look at my game raps for years, I'm complaining. Stop it. Stop with the look at me celebrations. Act like you've been there before. All these different things, and then you don't have to go. I mean, as much as we love the Minneapolis Miracle, what was the first move he made when he won the game? Yeah, he took off his helmet and looked at the crowd. So look at me. That cost it. I mean, it was legal. The game was over, but he almost hit that referee with his flying helmet. But 2 weeks ago, it cost him. When he finally did score, he took his helmet off right away. I mean, that stuff just rankles me. And he's emotional.
Didn't he get in a fight with Rhodes at training camp last year?
Oh yeah, that's true. I mean, they had they were really going after it, and I think that's fine. I have no problem with that. They're just trying to compete with each other. If someone's going to bust your butt, all day long and frustrate you and keep you from being able to do anything, you're going to try to beat him for whatever. But I think it was more Rhodes than anything because Rhodes was mad that Stefan was beating him. But I saw a little tussle at training camp in Mankato between Percy Harvin and Harrison Smith. Harrison Smith was like a rookie, and Harvin came up the middle, and Harry popped him. And Harvin didn't like it, and they were in toe to toe.
Well, in Harvin's defense, though, he was high at the time, so
that's true. And in Harrison's defense, that man's got an edge, and I love it. I mean, afterwards, he was talking about it, he just didn't back down 1 inch. I said, oh my, this guy's he's got an edge to him.
Did you see when he missed that? He almost had that interception, and then he collided with, and then that scream that he had on the sideline. Absolutely. That was really, really cool. How do you feel about this? There seems to be some online movement, which some Vikings fans online just rub me the wrong way. There's a lot of people talking about the decline of Rhodes, and I understand they weren't happy with the touchdown that was thrown against him. What was that receiver's name? I have it written down somewhere. Anyway, a rookie, and the replay was shown to Zimmer on some Fox TV show, and people were saying that he ripped Rhodes. I don't think he did. He basically just word for word said what happened. Bad position. Didn't do a good job of catching up to him before he turned his head and tried to make a play on the ball.
He was upset, though. I mean, he was.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I think he does look a not slower, just in general. I think he does still look a little banged up, at least to me. But there were people online saying I don't pay a corner, $12 million a year to get beat by a rookie. And so the movement is, Hughes is playing well. Let's switch out Rhodes for Hughes, which I think is wrong on multiple levels. We have 2 games of what Hughes has done. There's been catches on Hughes as well that I think people are just ignoring.
That's the point right there. Is
and he's not on the number 1 receiver 100% of the time. Not that Rhodes is either all the time, but Rhodes goes up against their best guy. Hughes is not doing that on a play-by-play basis as much.
The point is right there is when you say that he was I wrote this weekend that Hughes had a good game and Rhodes did not. I wrote that I'm concerned about Rhodes and wondering what's up with him. We still don't really know because he's not the same player was. But the point is, he gets beat in a big splash touchdown play. They're only one of the game, so you're going to all of a sudden focus in on that. We're not watching Rhodes for all the plays that he does make. So you have to take it in a context. I mean, like you just said, he's got the toughest guy for most of the game, and you've got to take it all in the context, and that's what the coaches do because they're not going to bench him, and they're not going to do that. I love Hughes. I love how he competes.
Yeah,
but
almost had 2 picks.
I don't know that he's going to be as good a tackler as maybe Rhodes might get. He's certainly doesn't have the size. I don't know. I think you need them both. I don't think you take a guy out who's coming back from an ACL and put him in a position where he's twisting and turning out in the corner. I think you use him just how you've got him. Let him get his strength back. Let him be the player that you hope he's going to be and thought he was going to be. I mean that's a reactionary take, and it just it's
and
not
they've
something
given up
happen.
what 10 points, 16 points. The Packers game, but other than
game.
Exactly. So why nitpick at that because you think that one play shouldn't have happened?
I agree with Joe. I will say that.
I'm not defending. I'm not saying that he's perfect or that there's not some concern there. I do think he's beat up. I think that's could get worse. Obviously, just logically. They made a big deal about him staying healthy this season. I don't think he's been healthy really at all. I heard stuff coming out of OTAs that he was limping around. So
he got hurt again.
It's how old is he? He can't even be 30 yet.
He's got to be close though.
Yeah, a lot of those guys are on the cusp. But the defense, I think one of the bigger things that stood out to me in this game, and then there was another example that I think was the Bears game, but I for whatever reason can't remember. You had Dalvin Cook fumbling the ball and the defense bouncing back and getting the safety, I think, on the very next play.
It was awesome. It was the next play. It was huge. It was choice.
And then they had, was that the Bears game? Where they held on the goal line and they
nope, that was Giants game. Linval hitting the center. That was last week.
Was it?
Yep.
Weird.
It was against his old team.
That might be part of it. Yeah, so then they give him that fresh set of downs, and then they actually move back further and make the field goal harder. I just think that's such a cool sign as to just how committed and never give up this defense has shown that it's been for pretty much the entire season outside of that one quarter with the Packers, which will motivate them moving forward.
And their inability to stop Chase Daniels. I got a little problem with that. But other than that, they've been great.
Yeah. I mean, they still only gave up 16 points, but you would think with their pedigree that it should have been a 3-point game.
Yep.
I was a little surprised by that, and that's asking for a lot. I get that. One just little thing that kind of irked me, and I get why they do things, and I do think I was a little surprised by Greenway's, and clearly he knows a lot more than this. I'm not saying that I'm surprised because I thought he was lying or something. But you asked a really cool question last week about game planning and how much of that is pre-planned versus whether it's a chess game or more of a reactionary thing, even though I guess chess is that way. And he really said it's not like the movies make it seem, in that especially on defense, you're just more reacting to that situation each time. Mm-hmm. I think the context was how much of a blow was it that you plan all week for Trubisky and then he plays one drive, gets hurt. Chase Daniels comes in, blah, blah, blah. I bring that up because the question is, especially with Anthony Barr being kind of the focal point, I would argue the Giants game was one of Anthony Barr's best games of his career. They just were doing a lot more aggressive play calling than some of the stuff you wanted them to do against the Bears. Putting pressure on Chase Daniels, for example, would have been nice. Some of the blitzes they were doing with Barr, so on and so forth. So I don't know, maybe if the Trubisky thing threw him for a loop in regards to their defensive play calling, but I feel like if they were as aggressive against the Bears, maybe things would have been a little bit different. But maybe aggression also, you think because it works that they're being more aggressive. Maybe they were trying, it just wasn't working. I don't know.
I don't know either. That's a very good point to consider. I will say is each opponent is different, and the game plan against that opponent. So they knew that they could do the things they did against this rookie quarterback, and they knew that they got to show him some looks early to try to confuse him and get him off because that kid's he's the real deal as far as I'm concerned. He's going to be really good in this league, and against the Bears, maybe they felt like they had to do it a different way because, like you said, there was just no pressure, and I don't know why they weren't blitzing, and maybe they, their whole idea was to contain Trubisky going into that game, and I suppose you can't just switch out of your game plan until you get a break or you get on the sidelines and figure it out. But there was only 2 series in the first half, so what can you do in those adjustments? Wasn't that how it was, or there was like 2
the
series?
Bears game?
Yeah, I mean,
they were really long drives.
Exactly. So take it with a little grain of salt, I guess. But that's a good point about how I would have liked to have seen more pressure and more things done against the Bears, but boy, the Vikings, the defense and the offense were on their heels that whole game for some.
I have a really strong feeling that had they known it was Chase Daniels all week, it would have been a completely different set of circumstances.
Yeah, look what the Raiders did with him.
I kept hearing that. I only got to see the last few minutes of it because it was overlapped with the Vikings, but they were saying they executed their plan perfectly, was the word on the street. So I really quickly also want to give just a shout out to a player who was a huge topic of conversation this offseason, to the point that someone from his team contacted me about some of the things that had been said about him. Dan Bailey is playing really. He was 4 for 4 on field goals. He's missed 1 field goal all season. That was against the Packers. He's also only missed 1 extra point this season. That was also against the Packers. It's nice to see him, I think, with some stability around him, doing what I think he knows how to do, which is just be kind of a consistent high-end kicker, which is what he's showing thus far anyway. Not a ton of pressure kicks either, but as we've seen, it could be a lot worse.
Yeah, I noted him in my post game too. He's been solid this year. He's got to be a relief of some sort to Zimmer.
He was super psyched about that last field goal he made. Like this, he was really animated all game, to be honest.
Right.
But the last one, he really was like psyched about it. So I think it's, like you said, a chip off his shoulder.
By the same token, it hasn't been. They're not long field goals. He better be making these. I thought maybe that they have maybe stabilized something with all the gerrymandering they've done with their kicking game in the past 2 years. Trying to find the snapper, trying to find the holder, trying to find the punter. They may have fallen into something that can work for them for a while, and I hope that's the case. It was interesting that with a chance to maybe go down and tie the Packers, the kicker that the Cowboys let go or held on to when they let Dan Bailey go, he made a field goal. There was a timeout called or whatever, or a penalty, so they had to go out and kick it again, and then he missed it, and that was the end of the game. So I mean, that was probably nice thing for Bailey to see, that the one that they lost, let him go, that. Or whatever. I'm fine with it. It's nothing that's gonna, as yet. He's not gonna win. He hasn't been winning games for us, but he's not been losing them either. So
totally. Yeah, I'll take it. Really well. We can get into that next week. Kind of where the NFC North is at. The Lions were on a bye. We talked about the Bears losing. How'd you feel about that Packers game? I watched some of it. A lot of people are saying the Packers have one of the best defenses in the NFL, which it just bothers me. Not that I don't agree with it.
They've got a good secondary.
The
Vikings kind of exploited
Smiths are
it.
good.
The Vikings kind of exploited it in the last 3 quarters of that game. So, the Eagles did. I don't think it's that great. I think it's good. It's improved. I think when you combine it with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, it all of a sudden becomes kind of a formidable challenge. But I get so tired of the plaudits of everybody. I mean, let's go back and see who's all got Super Bowl aspirations and see where they are now. Even the Chiefs got beat this weekend.
So that's true. The Packers, Devontae Adams didn't play, so I thought the Cowboys would have a good chance. I was happy, I guess, because I have Jones on my fantasy team. He had 4 freaking touchdowns, but he's coming on too. So, and suddenly my team is like really, really good. But the Eagles game, we've really talked about it a lot. We only have a couple minutes anyway, so the key I think is going to be, the Eagles do have a really good rush defense. Scheming around that, still getting Dalvin Cook the ball, because as we've talked about on the show multiple times, he does a lot of special things when he gets the ball in his hands. And they're still rewatching that the Giants game. There were a few times where he was just an inch away from breaking a long one. I mean, it was already a lot of decent runs, big chunk yardage, but he could have really gone for more. So I'm hoping that he isn't completely stifled. I would love to see this offensive line, now that they've had a few games together, to really not have a Bear situation where they get dominated to the point where it's all on the passing game. I would love to see some semblance of that balance. But I have a feeling the Vikings will come out firing in the passing game, because they'll be at home, they'll have the crowd on their side. They're coming off a positive game from Cousins, and they'll want to keep that momentum going.
You working up to a prediction there, son?
That is correct, sir. What was the outcome?
Wait! You don't get to go first, because we tied last week. You had Vikings at 28-17. No, I had them. Let's see, what was it? Oh yeah, you had 28-17 Vikings. I had 24-13 Vikings. So you were spot on the Vikings, but you missed the Giants by 7, and I was a total of 7 off. So there's no blood.
Therefore, I think that's the second time we've tied this year.
It is. The first week we did. So I therefore get to go first.
Ooh.
Again, because you have won the previous 2.
Ooh.
I still have a 3-point lead on you. But
I told you I wasn't messing around this year. I got a whole 70s era supercomputer.
You're the greatest, because your fantasy football team is hot, and now you
look at me.
You tied me this week, so you're really awesome.
I'm only losing by a little bit, which is such a moral victory.
And last week you wanted to shut down the podcast, so okay.
To be fair, that's an every week thing.
That's true. I got the Vikings in a very close one, because they're at home, 23-20.
Ooh.
So we'll see how that goes. I'm a little nervous, just because we're all saying it should be a winnable game, and the Vikings are coming off a victory, so they take that relative sigh of relief, and maybe it takes them a little longer to get back up. I think they'll get fired up at this one, but this is a tough opponent, and got to contain Wentz. They're banged up. I mean, Deshaun Jackson's out. They got some of their receivers they still got Alshon Jeffrey and Aguilar, and they got Ertz as a tight end. So they're still a very good offense. They're going to be tough, but the Vikings are going to have to score some points. So it's on Kirk. It's on Kirky boy.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I do feel like this is a put up or shut up game. I think he's been up and down. I think this is a good opponent, not a great opponent. It's at home. But he's got to really come through and build off of what happened last week. I for whatever reason, I have a feeling it'll be a low-scoring game, but I do think that they need to really come through offensively. So I think it'll be a 31-27 Vikings win. I have a feeling it might be something like 14-10 or something lame, but especially because the defense is playing so well. But I could actually, I like to have options and then go with my gut, and I'm going to change it to 30 from to 31-13 Vikings.
31-13 Vikings.
Someone's gonna gain some ground this week.
Yeah, right.
So everyone's gonna be on the edge of their seats at home, checking the podcast, writing down the scores, and
if you pass me by, you won't hear me here next week. I'll build
JoeBot 3000. That's the goal. Especially, I got a new webcam yesterday, which I'm gonna be using on the smoke break later today because I wasn't able to do the show on Sunday. I want to build an Oberly bot that just says has a shirt on that says "I hate the Big Ten."
I don't hate the Big Ten. I hate your take on the Big Ten.
I don't see the difference. But yeah, thanks for everybody for listening. I want to recommend that they check out the other Purple Territory Media shows on Big Heads Media. Those shows are about the labor and Load the Box. We will also be doing a new pre- and post-game show starting this weekend that'll be on Big Heads Media. Otherwise, you can get all of our stuff where you get your podcasts. It's available everywhere. So Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, all that good stuff. We will be back early next week, hopefully with some good news. Otherwise, I will be doing my video show, which is the Smoke Break, sometime today, which, if you're listening to this, it's probably already... Actually, if you're listening to this live, obviously it hasn't happened yet, but if you're listening to it on recording, just go to our YouTube channel, Vikings Territory, and you'll find all of our content there. But this has been the October 8th edition of Morning Joes. We'll talk to you guys next week. Skol.